we get experimental science. We're curious, non-judgmental.
Here is a insect wing. Do y'all see that color on the insect wing? This is a neat place to stop and chat for a moment. This right here, this iridescence is called a wing interference pattern, or a WIP, WIP. And what's silly about the WIPs is that all of our makers and friends communities all say they have WIPs that they're wanting to show off to people. And so when I first saw that, I'm like, who's doing wing interference patterns here? And it turns out that it's the work in progress, the shortening of that term. Because when I was working in graduate school, one of the experiments that we did was actually blocking wing interference patterns. You see how the colors right there are changing? As the worms are doing the work for us, as the wings are moving to different angles, you're seeing different colors popping up. Those iridescent colors actually have information embedded in them. So it's been shown that these animals, when they move their wings in different ways, in different directions, those fruit flies can see these interference patterns. You and I, if we're outside, our eyes can't pick this up. The reason we're seeing it right now is because of the LED light source that's being shined on them. If I turn off the LEDs, you just have the regular overhead light, even if I boost the power, you're not going to see it. So if I boost the exposure, look, same amount of light, we're not seeing this glow, right? It's only with the LEDs, and that's an intrinsic property of the LED lights, that we're able to see this kind of light source. So these wing interference patterns have been shown to be involved in mating behavior. So with mating, males have a mating dance, and there's songs as well that the male sings to the female in fruit flies. And apparently the female prefers different colors of the wing interference pattern that she can see and the male can see, but we can't. And there's actually some selective genetics that have been done for it as well. It turns out it's a trade-off. So the thinner red hues, the blue hues are thinner wing sections, and the reds are thicker winged. It's apparently prettier for the female to have more blue color in your wing, but the trade-off is that makes your wings more brittle and more likely to be injured, which is, I think, a neat trade-off feature of these animals. LED lights operate on a different frequency. So different frequency, Pericles, and their intensity is also a little bit brighter than your standard halogen bulbs. And yes, this is sexual selection that's occurring on the wing structures themselves, and it's giving you these different images. And again, now we can manually do the same thing the worms are doing. If I move the LED, look, LEDs are gone, LEDs back, and at various angles we have to light up the wing. There you go. There's more of that color right there, of that iridescence, and it's something that these animals can see. So the way you can block these colors is you put them into a box. This is a very old school style experiment that we did. Put them into a box that's wrapped in sarin wrap, either like red sarin wrap or blue, and all the light that is able to go into it changes, and you change the wing interference pattern that's visible to the actual fruit fly. And what's really cool is because then you can it turns out we actually nerfed their communication ability. So it looked like we did red and blue, and both red and blue of these iridescent colors were required for these animals to communicate with their wings, and they were communicating the threat of a potential predator. And so without them, oh, there's an ostracod maybe in the view. Without these, oh, let me grab that image. Without those, they weren't able to communicate the threat. Now, we did a lot of other experiments to demonstrate that it was wing movement. Like if you chopped off their wings, they wouldn't learn the behavior. If you made them blind, they couldn't learn the behavior, etc., etc., etc. But this was the one that was showing that it was part of the wing interference patterns were important. Again, that was nothing to do with sexual selection. That was an independent experiment, but it was just a unique bit of biology to see that. And you can see KK pointed this out a little bit earlier in chat as she saw the wing veins. The wing veins, you can see, are sites where there's a lot of color that pops. and that's because those regions are raised. Those are not 2-cell thick. Those are much higher in terms of the cellular content, and that's what's giving you a lot of those colors, just like that. Yeah, so Pericles, that was a learned behavior. What we were asking was if two species that are distantly related can communicate to one another. If they have not seen each other, they cannot. But if they cohabitate for a little while using wing interference patterns and wing movements, they learn each other's language and then they can communicate. So that's the learning element. Where it's the one that's not learned, where it's not a learned behavior, where it's innate, is within species. Like, so within a particular species, they can communicate without that cohabitation. That one's innate, but then there's learned behaviors as well. Curved surface, meaning light from other angles will hit the structures and reflect. Yes, exactly where ducky. Excellent. And it's, so actually, if we look at, let me find the paper really quickly, because there's two papers that really looked at this really thoroughly, where they did a ton of imaging of different, not just other fruit fly species, but other strains of fruit flies. And that's where they found it was sexual selection. Yeah, and actually the first hit that comes up for Smikes, sexual selection on wing interference patterns in Drosophila. And if we pull up the PDF, we have these really beautiful images. And again, what's cool is in the methods as well, they pointed out that they had to use their LED light source to see it, and they couldn't see it with your standard halogen bulb. So you can see these are all the same species of fruit fly, but what they did, they put individual fruit flies into vials and made lines of them, meaning that this vial now is all coming from an original host, and so that has you they're all genetically identical. So everyone in this vial is genetically identical, everyone in this vial is genetically identical, and so on and so forth. And you do comparisons with them, and they saw different lines had different structures of them. Seems so odd that such small basic things would go for it. I mean, I guess, Smikes, it makes sense, because, like, how do you stand out? So they don't have plumage. Some species of fruit fly have spots on their wings, and so it's where, you know, the males have spots and the females don't, and there's others where they both have spots. Let's see, I type in species here. Is this the same one? No, it's a different paper. What is the key here? So this is the differences in what we can see versus what the flies can see. So this column, fly vision, this column, human vision. So even like the colors that we're seeing with the LED lights, it would come across differently to the flies. So that's one cool component that we can do. And actually, yeah, this paper had like a modeling software that allowed them to figure out what they were seeing. And then there's a really cool figure that I don't know offhand now which paper it is, but there is a mass of images that are in this particular here. Oh, is this it? Oh, this is good enough. These are a bunch of different Drosophila species. So not a minute ago we were just looking at Drosophila melanogaster, and that's with a particular species. Each one of these here are different species. So Drosophila seychellia, Merciana, Simulans, Auroria, Suzuki. Suzuki right here, if you look at that component of the male wing, that's their wing spot. And so you can see actually that's pigment release, and there's no wing interference patterns there because there's no light. All the light's being absorbed at that one particular location. Albicans, immigrants, Heidii, Drosophila virilis, we've talked a fair bit about here. These actually, fun fact about Drosophila virilis, they are the only species that duet that we know of, meaning both the males and females sing to one another during mating. And that mating song is what drives the mating behavior. All the other ones that we've studied so far, it's the males are doing the singing to the female, and there's not a reciprocation of sound. Drosophila, lutescens, I remember lutescens. I thought I saw Kikawai on here. Anywho, I'll post this paper. Yeah, they took a bunch of measurements in one of the different regions of the wings. There's another paper as well that I'm not finding at the moment, but that figure was a good enough figure to illustrate all the different wing interference patterns that we're able to see. So I'll post this on the Discord if y'all would like. I think it's pretty neat. We'll put it on the mentioned on stream category on the Discord. Don't expect chivalry. Well, so there's no raising. There's no. They don't raise the individuals. There's no maternal or paternal care on them. They just lay the eggs and move on. And we talked a fair bit about the wing iridescence tonight and wing interference patterns. It was a fun, unique rabbit hole to jump down on, but I hope you all enjoyed that.